Absolutely gorgeous afternoon in Austin, Texas, just south of the capital of the great state of Texas at Circuit of the Americas for the VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, second race of the weekend. First one was great. Expect the same things out of this one. Race cars will be flying here at this racetrack, just like that airliner right over the horizon right there. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Brian Till along with Ryan Marine. We'll have all the action for you, and we saw plenty of it in race number one today. Interesting layout here at Circuit of the Americas this weekend. If you're used to watching races on the Grand Prix circuit, the one made specifically for the Formula One machines, a little abbreviated version, let's call it, the national circuit. So we're not going to run the last several corners and the long straightaway. There's a cut through at turn 6 that runs to the back straightaway, and it makes the lap just a little bit shorter, but it is still certainly interesting. A lot of the great passing zones still exist, so expect the same great racing that you're used to seeing here at Circuit of the Americas. And Ryan, I said it changes a little bit, but still a great run up the front straightaway to turn 1. And you've got some good passing there. The big change really kind of comes in, let's call it the middle third of the lap.
Yeah, it's at the end of the S's, that section that's modeled after Maggots and Beckett's at Silverstone. That's where you get to that cut through on this modified national course. We're calling it turn 6 and 6A and 6B. That then rejoins the traditional track, headed down to turn 12 into the stadium section. So you still get a lot of the same technical aspects. You still have great passing opportunities. And we saw really fun multi-class racing in the first race of the weekend earlier today.
You're a fan of VP Racing Sports Challenge, but you haven't caught it in 2025. You'll notice some differences as the cars roll off the grid. 3 classes, not 2, like you've seen in years past. GT3 machinery in the GTDX class. GT4 fills out the GSX class. And then, of course, the P3 category, which is LMP3-based machines. And, Ryan, you and I have had the pleasure of calling the 3 races so far this year, and this 3-class format has been magic.
Yeah, it's worked out great. There was a big question mark in the season opener at Daytona. What was the racing going to look like? I will say it's made the starts of these races a little bit more frenetic, as we saw in race 1 this morning, because the front of that GTDX field, those GT3 cars, they warm up their tires a little better. They've got better traction control than the LMP3 cars, and we see a lot of class intermixing between the LMP3s and GTDX early on. That adds some spice, but as far as the race plays out, it just adds another element to it. It's a lot of fun, and I'm excited again for race 2 coming up here shortly.
Yeah, like you said, the LMP3 machinery, rudimentary traction control, not nearly as advanced as it is on the GT3 and even the GT4 machines, and no anti-lock braking system. So those opening laps, you really see those GT cars charging into the back of the LMP3 category. We had some great racing this morning, some great stories. We'll talk more about that when we get into the race a little bit, but throughout the 3 different classes, some really, really good battles. And just a little bit of foreshadowing, Kiko Porto has pretty much owned GSX since the drop of the green in Daytona. He's 3 for 3. Adam Adelson had won both races in GTDX at Daytona. Little mistake here this morning. That cost him. Still ended up with a good finish. And the story really was the P3 category. Wildest finish I've seen in a long, long time.
Absolutely unbelievable. The top 2 had been in a great battle all race long. Teammates from Gebhardt Interlogistics Motorsports on the penultimate lap, within seconds of one another, both cars came to a halt. We found out from the team it had something to do with fuel pressure, whether it had to do with a pump in the fuel system. We're not entirely sure, but both cars came to a stop, and through came Jonathan Woolridge to pick up one of the most unpredictable wins that I could remember in recent motorsports history.
Yeah, fuel pumps have a hard time picking up fuel that's not there. So I'm kind of thinking that might have been the situation. Onto the front straightaway, looking for the green. It is the far starter stand where the green flag will wave, and everybody needs to stay in column formation. Saw a penalty handed out this morning for not doing so. So everybody lined up nice and straight. Keep it there until you cross the line. Green flag waves. Saddle up. We are on it at COTA.
Yeah, I did see a little bit of a miscue in the GSX field with a couple of cars jumping out a little early. Great battle at the front between the two teammates, Valentino Catalano, Oscar Tunjo, and it's Catalano who had pole position for this race, started second in race one. He grabs the early lead.
And if you are not familiar with the name Oscar Tunjo, well, it's because it's his first time in the United States racing here when we started this morning, but he has been impressive, and obviously Valentino Catalano was on it at Daytona. He was a revelation when they showed up in the final rounds at Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta in 2024, and that team came back, and Catalano and his teammate Marcus Palmer were on it again at Daytona. Some good battles back in the GTDX category.
Yeah, we saw some of that class overlap as Matthew Dickin is starting to drop down into the clutches of the GTDX field. You even see some GSX overlap with GTDX as well. Kiko Porto, perfect on the season. He's put a couple GTDX cars behind him here in the early stages. That's what multi-class racing brings. It's going to be like that for the next 43 minutes. At the front throw, though, the two Duquesnes from Gebhardt Interlogistics Motorsports controlling this race, led by the pole sitter, Catalano.
Catalano onto the front straightaway for the first time. These Michelins will get up to temperature pretty quickly here, I would think. Ryan, the front straightaway in the shade, but ambient temperatures in the mid-80s today, so I got to believe this dark circuit is going to be holding that track temperature, but the sun is going to be setting, and most importantly, we've had 5 hours of NASCAR action on this racetrack since the checkered flag this morning for these drivers. I'm thinking this is a very different racetrack that they're on.
You said it earlier today, the only thing that's the same are the turn numbers because the temperatures are way up, about 25 degrees ambient higher than they were when we raced earlier this morning. Plus you've got all that NASCAR rubber down on the racetrack. So it is a huge difference for these drivers and teams. They have to account for that with their setups. And so far, whoa, wild ride deep in the pack. That's Brian Thenis, fourth in LMP3, nearly going on a spin after he dropped the right sides in the dirt.
Yeah, it came on to the back straightaway, drops those rights, and it kind of takes a breath, but I'll tell you what, look at Jake Walker behind him, the leader in GTDX. He had a Daytona weekend he would like to forget, put it all behind him, and he was magic this morning in his racing with Adam Adelson. They showed some of the most respectful racing that I've seen in sports car racing in a long time this morning, and that BMW is underneath Jake Walker. He's got a good car underneath him. He showed it this morning, and I think they've been able to adjust and find the balance here for these changing track conditions this afternoon. The question is it going to be there over the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great fight this morning for the first third of the race between Walker and Adelson. They were side by side multiple laps in a row through the S's. A part of the track you don't see that all that often. Great respect between the two of them. Adelson did ultimately spin, but there was no contact. It was perfectly clean and a pretty good recovery from Adelson to get back up on the podium. He's dropped back to third here, so let's give a call to AJ Muss, who had a nice day earlier this morning. Got away perhaps with some contact that we thought, well, it certainly was reviewed by the stewards. No action was taken. But he's putting together a really nice season here in running in that second spot right now in the Ferrari in the GTDX class.
Adelson just behind him, but you know, we had great races throughout GTX. Kyle Washington, Samantha Tan had a great battle in the bronze category at GTDX this morning. And again, oh no, Adam Adelson looks up the inside of Thenis, who continues to move backwards in that LMP3 car and almost got turned there by Adelson. It's interesting. I would think that an LMP3 based prototype here should be well balanced. It's got everything that you need: lightweight, good downforce, good Michelin tires. But right now, Brian Thien is struggling a bit aboard the 77.
This is such a tough situation for the GTDX drivers. Adelson maybe a bit off the pace. This is Muss.
I wonder if he cut down a tire or bent a tie rod in that little bit of contact with the 77.
Definitely a possibility. We also saw him go wide. Yeah, I do think the right front might have been low. Here he comes, Adelson to the pit lane. This is huge. Points leader coming into the weekend after a perfect weekend to start the season at Daytona. He'll be on the back foot now for the final 40 minutes of this one.
Well, you talked about AJ Muss earlier after this morning's race where Muss finished ahead of Adelson. He closed in that championship. They come into this race, and Adam Adelson only has a 60-point lead over AJ Musk, per my math, which isn't always the best, but I think it was pretty easy to add those numbers, and this is not going to help Adam Adelson at all.
Now he'll need a yellow flag to bunch the field back up to get back into the hunt, I suspect, for a podium. He's got the pace to recover, but it's just a question of how quickly can the Wright Motorsports team make that tire change. But you hate to see it. It's been a really strong start to the season from Adelson, but this definitely has him on the back foot. Now this is a repeat of the battle we saw earlier today with Kyle Washington and Samantha Tan. Washington has the better of her right now, running up in the 4th position, but Samantha keeping the pressure on. And back in the GSX class, Kiko Porto, the superlatives just keep mounting when you talk about the season he's had. Dominant earlier today, picking up his 3rd win in as many starts this season.
Yeah, he's just been so impressive. A good battle here as well. BMW, Toyota, side by side, coming in to the turn 13, 14, 15, that triple apex area. And look at Patrick Wilmot try to go up the inside of the 68 of Porter right there. Nothing doing.
Porter had a strong drive to a podium in race 1, and we found out after the race on the opening lap there was some contact that actually bent his steering. And he posted on social media that he had to have the wheel at about a 45-degree angle just to keep the car going straight. So pretty amazing to think he was able to put in that run to the podium given that issue that happened on the first lap of the race. Right now he's dropped back a little bit, running in the 4th spot, and he's coming under a lot of pressure here. Wilmot, runner-up in the championship a year ago, looking very stout in his BMW.
And the championship complexion of GSX changed considerably after race 1 today. A couple of drivers not making the trip to COTA, so that was part of it, but Wilmot picked up 3 positions in the championship with his 4th place finish this morning. And Ian Porter that you were talking about, he picked up 4 positions in the championship. The big gainer was Stephen Clemens, who had that weekend to forget at Daytona, but then he was magic this morning with a good finish there, and it moved him well up the order at that 2nd place finish this morning. And like I said, the championship in GSX really got jumbled after today's race.
It was a big change, definitely. You talk about Clemens and the weekend he had at Daytona. He had the pace to win both of those races. Certainly race 1, it looked like it was in the bag until he had a fuel issue on the final lap, very similar to what we saw in LMP3 this morning. But despite having all that pace, Clemens 2 results in Daytona, an 11th and a 15th. Nothing to show for it, despite running at the front in both races.
Yeah, and I need to be careful how I say this because I'm not going to get a Christmas card from anybody in the paddock when I say this, but the fuel thing is interesting to me, especially in the GSX category. There are no blockers in the fuel cell. You can put as much fuel in as you want, and I just sit and look at it, and I understand that fuel is weight, but I would rather carry an extra 10 kilos and guarantee the checkered flag than try to make the car a half a tenth quicker each lap and run out of fuel. That's just me. I'm not a particularly big gambler, right? But, you know, I look at the fuel thing and I wonder if we just try to cut it too close sometime.
Well, again, it's been a trend through 3 races this season. It's happened 2 times. Well, 3, I guess. I mean, in 2 races, 3 instances of it. So it's definitely a talking point. But so is this fight here. Yeah. Washington in the Porsche, Samantha Tan in the BMW, and Samantha is just heaping the pressure on Kyle. These 2 will have raced against one another before in the SRO paddock, so not a surprise to see them linked together here, and perhaps some of that experience going head-to-head against one another, that could help them make sure this is a nice clean fight here for the rest of the race.
Samantha's one of those drivers, much like Kyle, who just continues to improve all the time. She won in the bronze category today. She was the highest finishing bronze driver, and she leads that championship. Kyle Washington doing a great job, but he's looking in his mirrors a lot, and I think if I'm James Sofronis on the pit box, I'm saying, look, you need to focus forward and stop paying attention to the rearview mirror so much. Driving offline and trying to be defensive is only slowing him down and moving her back closer. Mark Austin around.
Yeah, Lone Star Racing, hometown team. Mark from just down the road as well, getting the chance to race at his home track. Now trying to get that car turned back around. Really cool paint scheme. We've got a bunch of these Joker-themed paint schemes, right? Both of them usuals as well. So kind of interesting that that's a theme here this year. But tough break there for Austin. Aptly named, of course, racing here at Circuit of the Americas, a track he knows extremely well.
And AJ Peterson, who owns and runs that team, always puts such a great car on the racetrack, regardless of the series, regardless of the race. I've seen him win endurance races, sprint races. He always runs such a good program. And he's a great barbecue guy. Not as in finding it to buy it, but he is a great cook. He and I, when we see each other at the racetrack, we always share recipes. Look at this.
Yeah, swap in position. Samantha Tan has been able to get around Kyle Washington, and this is for the lead in that Bronze Cup subcategory within GTDX. That's for drivers that are either up in age or low in experience, or in some cases both. But in this case, these are the top two in that bronze category that is for drivers that are designated by the FIA a bronze-graded driver, or those that IMSA has put in that category at their own discretion. That is something they can do. Everyone in GTDX, though, chasing this car. And we talked about Stephen Clemens needing to bounce back from a disastrous Daytona. Jake Walker was exactly the same. Had an incident in qualifying, couldn't even start race 1 of the season, had misfortune in race 2 in Daytona, but this morning showed the kind of pace that I think we expect from him this year. This is a driver and team very capable of going for a championship.
Well, Turner Motorsports has won at Circuit of the Americas before, and you talk about, you were mentioning earlier, what a dreadful weekend it was. No points in race 1, very few points in race 2 as well, and then that big haul this morning, but he's still at 9th in the championship. Some 430 points out of it, but you know what? You don't give up. We still have 9 races to go, including the one running right now. We're only 3 races in. We've only seen 3 checkered flags, so damage here to the 95. Obviously, Vin Barletta has either found a tire wall or another competitor.
And that's teammate too, Walker, and the Liqui Moly sponsored Turner BMW. Good news is he's been able to continue on. This is the traffic, though, that we talked about at the open of the show. LMP3 leaders, overall leaders coming through the GSX field, and how they manage that traffic. We thought that was going to be the storyline in race 1, and it was, until the fuel issues cropped up late in the going. But both of these drivers, Catalano and Tunho, did a really good job managing that traffic in a clean manner. Sometimes still willing to take some risk, but that's part of the game of multi-class racing, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that was one of those deals where Tunho was like, I'm going. You know, he's watching Catalano kind of pull away, and he doesn't want to get stuck there in traffic. Interestingly enough, as they came down through 3 and 4 there, turns 3 and 4, it was all 3 classes. You saw Frank Depew in the GTDX Aston Martin in there, a couple of GSX cars, and then, of course, the prototypes. And as you said, Ryan, it's what multi-class racing is all about. Mark Austin's gotten back underway, so kind of no harm, no foul there. On the rear wing of that Toyota Supra of Ian Porter as they come onto the front straightaway. And you get an idea as they run down the front straightaway, the speed of that Mercedes in the GTDX class, not 10, 15 miles an hour quicker, but it's just enough to clear him by several car lengths and get to the corner. And it should have better aerodynamics, a little more sophisticated under tray, bigger front splitter, larger rear wing. So it should get through the high-speed S's a little quicker as well.
Yeah, you can see that as Austin starts to pull away. Now he's caught some traffic. The trouble is, yes, the car has greater performance capability through this part of the track, but it's a difficult place to go side by side, especially given all the running that's happened throughout the day with the marbles and things like that have developed offline. So Austin has to be a bit patient here, working this traffic, and now onto this truncated back straightaway. This is a shortened part of the course due to running the short course here this weekend. Maybe this gives him a chance to get up on Chris Walsh and maybe make this pass stick into the stadium section, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do. This should open the door for Porter, though. This is the fight for the final step of the podium in GSX. Walsh in the BMW, Porter in the Supra.
Well, and Chris Walsh wants to make amends for the problem that he had in race 1 where he found the tire wall. My personal belief is he found it with some help. There was no penalty that was handed down, but that's why you and I don't make the calls. But it damaged the front end of that car, bent the steering arms, and he had to retire. So he didn't have the finish that he wanted, but he did have good speed at the time. He runs third right now. He'd like to come back with a good podium finish here, because when you look at him in the championship, he sits seventh. He picked up a couple of positions after the race this morning, only because we had some drivers who weren't here. As I said, the car was damaged and didn't make it to the end, but you get an idea of the great battle here. And look at Ian Porter trying to use that prototype car as a pick to work his way through.
That's really impressive. Ian does not have much multi-class racing experience. He did do a few Porsche Endurance Cup races last year, which was a mix of Porsche Cup cars and Porsche Caymans. He was always in the lower class, though, in the Cayman. So he has a little bit of experience dealing with faster cars coming through, but not a whole lot. However, he used that perfectly to grab that position. I think these two are going to be fun to watch, though, Brian, this season. Both of them still new to the GT4 level of racing. Chris did a little bit last year, but not much, and it's brand new in terms of this kind of racing for Ian Porter, and he's new to the Supra. I think these are two guys with some really good raw pace, and I'm curious to see what they can do as they get some experience this year.
Brian Till and Ryan Marine with you from Circuit of the Americas, VP Racing SportsCar Challenge, the fourth round of the season, and leaders right now working their way through GTDX traffic. And for 19-year-old German Valentino Catalano, he drives like someone well beyond his years, Ryan. We've seen him make very mature moves and judgments in the races that we've seen, both in the final rounds of 2024 and certainly coming into 2025. This is a young man I think we're going to have our eyes on for a while.
Well, he knows this car really well. He's raced the Duquesne LMP3 in the European Le Mans Series. He's raced it in the Asian Le Mans Series. He's a Prototype Cup Germany champion in this same chassis with this same team. So that is a help when you're coming to a new championship, racing on circuits you've never seen before. At least you know the car that you're driving incredibly well, and he's been using that to his advantage. To your point, so strong on debut at the tail end of last year, and that just carried over to Daytona, where he was just about perfect. Pole for both races there, wins in both of those races, and it looked like he was set for 3 on the trot until they ran afoul of the fuel issue earlier today.
Yeah, absolutely, and you talk about young drivers with a lot of talent. Jake Walker leading in GTDX, just as they did. I wonder if they had tacos for lunch. Well, I saw a post from Will Turner saying breakfast tacos and then maybe some victory tacos for lunch. It's going to be tacos all around perhaps for Jake Walker, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if he can hold on to the point. But this is another one of those young drivers, and I think Turner Motorsport has always been so good at developing young drivers, and the veteran drivers that they have on the team do such a good job of not only driving and helping bring data in, but we said this in race 1, Robbie Foley, who is a full-time driver with Turner Motorsport and BMW on the box, coaching Jake Walker here this weekend, and that's part of that development program that Turner Motorsport has.
It's a great team, so much experience with the BMW platform. To have someone like Robbie Foley up on the box, because he's been there, he started off in Jake Walker's shoes, where he was the one getting the lessons from the likes of Bill Oberlin, and now he has developed himself into a BMW factory driver, someone who can help the young up-and-comers like Jake Walker. And the other thing this team does extremely well, they really lean on the esports side of things, the sim world, for training, but they also have a big presence in esports. Ooh, is that a change for the lead? I think it is.
No, I think that was the lap car.
Oh, it's lap
36
traffic.
of
Yep.
Matt Dickin. But yeah, it caught my attention as well. Like,
yeah, similar coloring on those two cars out of the corner of my eye. The last thing I want to say, though, about Turner is they have actually already 2 wins today. They got a big esports win in the world of Gran Turismo earlier this afternoon. So they're going for 3 wins in less than 12 hours if they can pull this off here today.
that's what they do, right? They win.
Yep.
You know, we talked about them. They now have 4 wins at Circuit of the Americas because Jake Walker added to that total in 2013 and 2014. So now they've got 4 here and they just continue to develop that program. You mentioned it earlier, more starts in BMW for BMW in the history of that marque in motorsports, the winningest privateer team for BMW in the world last year, and it's just, the accolades continue to grow for that program as they continue to run. Brian Thenis now in the 77, the white, blue, and red prototype under attack from Kyle Washington and his GTDX, that's always hard for me to say, Ryan. As he works by, and Kyle Washington, where did Samantha Tan go? Has she pulled out on him? I believe she has.
Yes.
She had that prototype between the two of them, and now that prototype has gone by, but there's Samantha as she moves forward, trying to get past Roland Krantz onto the front straightaway.
And she is catching Matthias Perez-Kompank, who's having a nice quiet day running in third at the moment, at a pretty good clip. She was nearly a second faster than Matthias on the last lap and isn't that far behind. I think she's right there in striking distance, in fact. Here comes the battle into turn one. So Samantha Tan, who's had a quiet start to the season, solid, did win in the Bronze Cup earlier today, but has a chance for an overall podium. She can make this pass here in the final 23 minutes.
Well, I'll make these 2 points. The two Ferraris that you see out there, both AF Corsa out of that stable. AJ Mess in one, Matthias Perez-Kompank, as you mentioned. Kompank, if you look at the front of that red Ferrari, you'll see some blue highlights with the white, and that is Perez-Kompank. AJ Moss has green highlights on his car, so if you see those two cars coming, you can kind of differentiate between the two. But you were talking about an overall finish. Speaking of the overall finish this morning, Jake Walker was only a half a second away from winning this race overall this morning, so that's how quick the GTDX cars are, and Jake Walker behind the wheel of that Turner Motorsports BMW.
Yeah, he had a chance potentially to pull alongside and make that pass coming to the checkered flag. No need to do it, of course. The points are not paid on overall finishes, but that kind of caught me off guard as well until somebody pointed that out on social media. That actually was a photo finish for the overall win, surprisingly. The two class winners nearly side by side at the line at the end of race one.
When I glanced up and saw that, I felt certain that he was being lapped, you know,
right.
and yeah, he won his category. And then I looked at timing and scoring. I was like, no, that's how close it is. Patrick Wilmot trying to close down in his number 12, the BMW from Swish Motorsports, running in the 5th position right now. Where is Chris Walsh ahead of him? They had that great battle going on. Walsh now disappearing a couple of corners up there. So Wilmot has slipped back just a bit.
Yeah, 5 seconds or thereabouts, the gaps between the two BMWs. Good to see the BMW GT4 platform looking a little more strong here this weekend. They had a tough weekend across the board at Daytona and Michelin Pilot Challenge as well, but perhaps the circuit here at Circuit of the Americas suiting them just a little bit more, and strong runs right now. Walsh in the 4th spot, Wilmot solidly in 5th. Wilmot did score a podium in the season opener, has finishes of 7th and 4th subsequent to that, and runs right now just on the outskirts of the top 5 in the 5th spot.
You know who's missing in all of this, Ryan? Adam Adelson. He had that flat tire. We believe it was a flat tire, being shown back there in 7th position right now, and that is going to be huge in this championship if this is how things finish. Right now, Jake Walker in the BMW leads, and then two Ferraris, AJ Muss and Matthias Perez-Kompank. They run 2nd and 3rd, and there's Adelson. He's out on track, but that was a painful trip to pit lane to get that tire changed.
We mentioned at the time that it was likely going to take safety car intervention to bunch the field back up to get him in the mix for any kind of representative result. Has clawed his way up to 7th in class in this green Wright Motorsports Porsche 911, and the pace is there. He's running 134s. That's right there with what the leaders in class. In fact, he's been the fastest car in class the last handful of laps according to timing and scoring. But the problem is he's got so much ground to try and make up. His next target is Vin Barletta, who's about 9.5 seconds up the road. At their current pace, he should be there in about 3 laps. But trying to get to Kyle Washington could prove to be an impossible task with the amount of time remaining and trying to overcome that unplanned tire change at the very early part of this race.
Well, what he likes to see, I can guarantee you, is Jake Walker out in front right now. He doesn't want to see A.J. Muss get to the lead and take maximum points, because Muss is his nearest competitor in the championship right now, just 60 points down. And interesting to see how this unfolds. We'll add up the points at the end and see if A.J. Muss has taken the championship lead. But as long as Jake Walker stays up there in front, that's going to help. And for A.J. Muss, he's got a pretty good lead over his teammate Perez Compaq, so I don't think he has to worry about anything from behind right now. Adam Adelson just needs to put his head down and move forward and get as many points as he can.
Well, that's the goal at this stage. Looks like maybe one more position could be a possibility, but it's a difficult challenge, to say the least, that lies ahead of him. So let's take a look at what we've got brewing elsewhere. And looks like we're starting to see Catalano pulling ahead of Tuno. It's 5 seconds. They never were that far apart at the beginning or in race one of the weekend. Similar gap from Walker back to Muss, and Kiko Porto continues to have the GSX class on lockdown, nearly 11 seconds ahead of Clemens. Now Porter up to third. Could it be another Toyota sweep of the podium? They did it this morning. They're 1, 2, 3 again.
Well, it'll be interesting. You and I talked about this morning. In the GTDX category, there is what is known as success ballast. After the Daytona weekend, Adam Adelson had 45 kilograms added to his car. And then you look down the order, second place, Perez Compaq had 25K added to his, and A.J. Muss had 15 kilograms added to his Ferrari. So in GTDX, they deal with that balance of performance in a different way. In the GSX category, it's all predicated off of balance of performance that the GT4 cars run in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. And there was some BOP changed between Daytona and this event. The only car that's kind of running up front that didn't have any is the Toyota. So you wonder if the Toyota competitors in Michelin Pilot are going, hang on a second, guys, don't do this to us, because if you guys run strong in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge in the same car, we all may get punished.
Well, the BOP is a black art, as we know, and it's an unenviable task to have to sift through all the data and set it. And the thing you have to remember is you're trying to balance the platforms, but not every driver is created equal, and not every manufacturer has a driver with the wealth of experience that's required to give you, the full data on what the car is capable of. So it is a real challenge for sure. And all things considered, I think you look at the quality of the racing we saw at Daytona, that's carried over here to Circuit of the Americas, and you have to say that the track record IMSA has of trying to balance these very different cars is incredibly strong.
Right now, though, those Toyotas up front, 2 Rafa Racing entries in GSX, the 8 of Kiko Porto and the 68 of Ian Porter. They really need to change names here. They're just way too similar for me to say those back to back, Ryan. And then you said it, Stephen Clemens there in third, Toyota 1, 2, 3.
That is a change in position, though, for second. Porter has gotten around Clemens here in recent laps. It's been a really good charge back through the field for Porter. Remember, it wasn't that long ago he was fighting with Chris Walsh, and that's now resolved itself. Really strong drive for Porter, and that also means that the Rafa Racing team is 1-2. So not just a 1, 2, 3 for Toyota, but that Rafa team with Porto and Porter caught me out too.
See?
Really, really strong. Yeah. Kiko and Ian, how about that?
There you go. That's what we'll do from now on. And think about this. In the GT classes, GTDX, GSX, Driver Championship, Team Championship, Manufacturer Championship. So there are 3 different championships in each one of those classes that's on the line. So manufacturers handing the team a good car, team's doing a good job handing it to drivers, and everybody celebrates. And if you're a driver, you know what you want to do? You care about your team, but you want to bring the manufacturer a championship, because those are the ones who smile on your career and help you move along.
That's a huge part of the game, especially in sports car racing. And right now, it's such a golden age of manufacturer involvement in sports cars, whether we're talking about prototypes like we see in the GTP class in the WeatherTech Championship, on down to GT racing, whether it's GT4 or GT3 or GSX and GTDX as it's known here. So many manufacturers are flocking to sports car racing these days, and what that means is opportunities for promising young drivers to catch the eye of one of these OEMs. And that's the thing that, to your point, can absolutely jumpstart a career, and not just jumpstart it, but sustain it and make this a place where you can make a living for 15 or 20 years.
Absolutely. 2/3 of the race down from Circuit Americas, a third to go, just under 15 minutes of VP Racing SportsCar Challenge action. Brian Till, Ryan Marine with you. Up the front straightaway, climbing the hill to turn one. That car moving on the brakes as A.J. Muss, the former Olympic snowboarder, takes us to some familiar territory down the hill and around the corners, right, Ryan? Looks like he's on a snowboard, but certainly the weather here, not snowy at all, and it looks like the drivers have really gotten a good handle on this racetrack that we said was going to change a lot, and hats off to the crew here at Circuit of the Americas, because I'm sure they went out, swept the racetrack, got all the old rubber, the other rubber blown off, and got it all sorted out, and that helped make sure that the competitors here in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge had a good circuit to run on.
Yeah, great job by the staff at Circuit of the Americas. As you would expect, it's been a busy day for them. That NASCAR Xfinity Series that just wrapped up before this. What a drive from Connor Zillage. Started up front, got shuffled to the back, had to race his way back to the front. I mean, what a talent he is. But, you know, after all of that running that was done today, to have the track in these kind of conditions to put on a race like this has been spectacular stuff. So to your point, kudos to everyone at COTA for looking after us, making sure the track is in the best state possible.
Well, you take a look at the 76, Stephen Clements having a great run, but maybe it's too great, Ryan, because I'm understanding that he's going to be getting a 10-second post-race time penalty for multiple shortcuts of the track. So, you know, people look at track limits here at COTA, they're very visible, and they've been given the opportunity to use the painted area behind the curb. You just can't go beyond the painted area. So that white stripe out there along the green at the exit of that particular corner is the boundary. But for Stephen Clements, he's obviously been beyond that multiple times, and the officials looking at that saying, any advantage that you gained, we're going to take it away with a 10-second penalty.
Any documentation that I saw coming into the race at corner exit, you're allowed to use the green up to the white at the exit of the corner. As long as you don't go 4 tires beyond that, you're good to go. At the apex, though, the track limits are judged by the candy stripe, the red and white curbing that you see. Can't go 4 tires beyond that. Not sure exactly which one he ran afoul of. Doesn't really matter. That 10-second penalty is coming his way. Now, how far back to Chris Walsh? Looks like Chris would gain that spot. The question would be, can Patrick Wilmot get a little bit closer and maybe take advantage of this penalty too and get himself up into the 4th spot? Right now, if the checkered flag came out, that 10-second penalty swap Clements and Walsh, but could be a lot more punishing, especially if, heaven forbid, we have a safety car and this race ends under yellow. Suddenly we're talking about him dropping to the back of the class rather than losing just 1 position.
Don't say that. That's the announcer's curse. Don't do that.
I said heaven forbid first. Surely that has to count for something.
Well, and you've got to believe that the issue might be more at the apexes. That typically is considered a shortcut. That's where most of the time is gained. You can gain time by going wide at the exits. For certain, it's a larger radius. You can carry more speed. And there's kind of a time-distance equation that comes in with that. Shortcutting the apex is definitely going to give you an advantage gain, and the officials are not going to smile on that.
At the front, still Valentino Catalano, who, if not for grinding to a halt with a lap and a half to go this morning, would be going for a 4th straight win to start the season. He's done a really good job here, pulling out the gap over Oscar Tunjo, who dominated much of race 1, let's not forget, but has dropped back 15 seconds behind Catalano. This has been a strong performance from Valentino here in race 2.
Well, do you remember in race 1 this morning, we saw the same thing. It's almost like Tunjo burns the tires off and is a little more aggressive with the car, and we saw the balance of his machine go away towards the end of the race, and it seems like Valentino does a little bit better job of conserving and having a car that's better on the long run. So perhaps that is
about
it.
That too.
Yeah, perhaps that's it. We saw that lockup, earlier today as well for Toonho. So I think just kind of coming to grips with these cars, pardon the pun, a lot of time in LMP3-based machinery, but more time in a Ligier than in a Duquesne.
Yeah, that's right. So a little bit of an adjustment you need to make there from one chassis to the other. Each has their own intricacies, but it has been a case where Toonho has been stronger at the start of the race, at least it appears that way, and has dropped off in the second half. No such drop-off for Jake Walker, whose lead is now 13 seconds. No, it's just 5.7 seconds, sorry, over A.J. Muss in second. We should note that a little while ago, about 5 minutes ago, Adam Adelson did catch and pass Finn Barletta, so that moves Adam up to 6th, but I don't think he's got the time to run down Kyle Washington. The pace has been strong, but the gap is perhaps a bit too big, nearly 30 seconds at this point. So I'm afraid without something going wrong for any of the front runners, Adam Adelson's recovery might stall out in the 6th spot.
Well, and he really wants that position. Jake Walker wants to get by the 54 of Woolridge, or had Woolridge just gone by him. They were really close together, and you don't want to get caught up in somebody else's problem. But you go back to Adelson and A.J. Muss. If Adelson can get up to the 5th position and A.J. Muss finishes 2nd, they'll be tied in points when they leave here. If he's beyond 6th position and A.J. Muss holds on to that 2nd place, A.J. Muss will take over the championship lead in GTDX.
And Muss has done it by being so consistent this year. He's not finished off the podium yet in one of these races. Finishes of 2nd, 3rd, and 2nd, and now he finds himself 2nd once again. In the GTDX class, really no one has had that level of consistency. Everyone has had at least one bad day. So he's doing a really good job to be fast, but also mistake-free to this point in the championship, and that's helped him, even though he hasn't necessarily challenged for outright victory within the class to this point. The fact that he can be a fixture on the podium has put him in prime position through nearly 4 races now.
Frank Depew will be the recipient of another 10-second penalty for multiple track limits violations as well. But you were talking about Muss. He and Adam Adelson were the only 2 drivers after the first race this morning that had not finished off the podium in the GTDX class. You talk about the consistency, there it is. And for A.J. Muss, he can measure himself against a champion in class because Adam Adelson has won a championship in SRO competition in GT3-based cars. So he's got a great measuring tool to work off of right there. He's got to be pleased with the job that he's done. You and I have watched him over the last several years go from what I almost refer to as kind of a bull in a china closet in the early going. There wasn't a lot that he didn't hit, right? And now we talk about how he has such a good head on his shoulders, and his racecraft has really come to him, I believe. Is the 8 slow?
It is. I think it is. It appears that way. Kiko Porto.
That's Kiko Porto.
The race leader in GSX. Porter does look faster, as does Clemens. Oh, yeah, that car's certainly off the pace.
Understand Kyle Washington will have a penalty as well. There's Kiko Porto. He's shaking the car back and forth. There's over 6 minutes to go. This car cannot be out of fuel. It
Surely
just can't
not.
be.
Trying to see if there's any sign of a tire down. That still has some pace in it.
It looked square, and it looked like he shook the car a little bit, and then it kind of came back to life, which typically would be indicative of some kind of a fuel pickup issue. But I'm going to go back to the fuel cell as the fuel cell. You don't have to block it off and make it smaller. You can put as much fuel in it as you want. Still, from time to time, is that him wiggling the car, or is there something with the suspension that is making it unstable in a straight line?
That's a good question. But whatever the case, it's cost him the lead. Ian Porter now finds himself at the front of the GSX class. Clemens is 2nd, but has a penalty coming his way. So that would then promote Chris Walsh up to 2nd. Clemens would still be on the podium as they run. But no shortage of drama in these races, just like we promised, Brian.
Yeah, just like we promised. And it's one of those things that your crew really needs to be letting you know what's going on. So-and-so's getting a penalty, so-and-so's getting a penalty, and that is the message to you of not only are they getting a penalty, but you need to make sure you don't. You know everybody else is falling afoul of the rules. Don't do it. Keep your wits about you, and you're going to gain positions on the racetrack by these others making mistakes.
It's worked out to the benefit of some and obviously to the detriment of others in this one. It's interesting that we've seen so many track limits penalties in race 2.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a talking point in race 1. Here's a speculative theory for you. We've got the sun coming down, the shadows are growing long. Does that just change your sight line a little bit?
Ryan, now you're talking like a race car driver. I couldn't see it. The sun was in my eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, too, you get that confidence after being on the racetrack, and Kiko Porto now well off the pace through turn 15. The car still seems to have drive. It just doesn't have pace, so not sure what the problem is, but there are no problems for Valentino Catalano. I mean, he is making the run look easy overall, and now Porto on the side of the track parked with just under 4 minutes to go.
Well, remember, Stephen Clemens and all drivers actually that have those 10-second penalties, they are hoping that race control will let this stay green to the finish. Again, those 10-second penalties become a lot more punishing when the field gets bunched up behind a safety car. So Clemens, as it stands, would be on the podium, but a yellow would drop him back half a dozen positions.
Yeah, easily half a dozen positions. And quite honestly, race control doesn't care about that. Race control cares about making sure the race is safe. We saw stalled cars on the racetrack on the final lap in race number 1, but on the final lap, you're not going to go full course caution. You're just simply going to cover it with a local waving yellow, which is what they did. But we've got a couple of laps to go here with the pace that's being run. So be interesting to see what race control decides. I'm not exactly sure where Kiko Porto is parked, but if he's in a safe spot, they'll leave him. 32 now with a 10-second post-race penalty, multiple violations with track limits.
Yeah, that's Kyle Washington. I don't think that would cost
big.
him a position, would it?
Yeah, it's good. Well,
actually it would.
Yeah.
Maybe. Adelson
and that's going to help Samantha Tan in that bronze championship if he gets moved back a position.
Yeah, I don't know that Adelson is close enough, though. I think he's still over 20 seconds behind. The car behind Washington overall is an LMP3 car. And also, Adelson's not in the bronze class.
All right. Let me throw a little conspiracy theory out. You know where I'm going here? It's a Porsche that Kyle Washington's driving. He's behind Samantha Tan. Being behind her right now doesn't matter if Adam Adelson gets in there, because Adelson's not in it for the bronze championship. They could help Porsche by backing up and letting Adam Adelson by, and that would help Adelson in the run for the overall championship.
That's an interesting point. It certainly would. It would take the two teams cooperating, and they've got their own agendas, of course. But anyway, we got less than 2 laps to go. We'll see if
we'll find out, right?
If they're listening to you, Brian.
Think about it. John Wright down at Wright Motorsports and James Sofronis at GMG. White flag waves. One more to go here for the leaders. So the white flag is out. Final lap. And Valentino Catalano up the hill into turn 1 one last time.
Really strong drive. 32 seconds the lead over Oscar Tunjo. That is stunning. As close as they were throughout the beginning, throughout race 1. Tunjo, though, all things considered, it was a relatively late call-up to be here. He's filling in for Marcus Palmer, who was under the weather. We hope Marcus recovers quickly and we can see him at a future round of the championship. But Tunjo's done a really good job stepping in, knows the car, has competed against the team before in other championships, gets to climb in one of their cars and instantly was on the pace this weekend.
Tell you what, this is good news for Jake Walker. What a performance he's had this weekend after recovering from, as we said, a Daytona that he would like to forget. But this is big. Could be 2 wins for him. The championship leader back in 6th position is going to give him an opportunity to close that down. Came into today's afternoon race in 9th position, but he's going to rocket up the points here. He's still going to be well back. He's got a long way to go, but if he keeps performing like this and others falter, that young man could have a shot at the championship by season's end.
Certainly could, but he's got to be close to perfect the rest of the way. He's used those mulligans up already in Daytona.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of times it's better to use them early, and speaking of using them early, Valentino Catalano has used everything the Duquesne chassis has given him, and he wins at Circuit of the Americas. Heartbreak this morning and elation this afternoon.
Great bounce back from the team, perfect performance. Catalano judged all the traffic perfectly and took that car to the finish. And for Jake Walker, as you see the car of Kiko Porto off to the side, deemed in a safe area, that's great news. Get to finish this under green flag conditions, but certainly a great drive from Walker. But how about this? Ian Porter, first year in the championship, just his second year of racing, period. And for Smooge Racing, the Rafa Racing team, Ian Porter flashes those headlights. He'll take the win in GSX.
Impressive stuff. And for Jake Walker, talk about impressive. This young man, Turner Motorsports, it is taco time once again in Austin. Jake Walker with the victory at COTA. Man, good stuff, Ryan. Good stories. We're going to have to watch and see how these penalties get applied as they cross the line here and see where the finishing positions are, how the championship complexions will change after all the penalties are assigned. I think everybody pushing a little bit harder this afternoon, perhaps thinking that some of the transgressions that they had this morning weren't seen, so they would try them again this afternoon. But it's like speeding down the interstate. Sometimes you get caught, sometimes you don't, and some of these drivers running afoul of those track limits violations. But the biggest celebration at all may be on the part of the Rafa Racing team, and especially Ian Porter. I mean, think about that, a world champion in Call of Duty, 3 different times a world champion, but his first win in professional racing and his first win here in the VP Racing SportsCar Challenge.
Massive accomplishment. Admittedly, it comes after misfortune for his teammate, so it's a mixed bag from that perspective for the Rafa Racing team. But you know what? You take the wins however you can get them, and this is a guy that, given a little bit more seat time, he's got something innate. He's got some raw ability, and we've seen that on display for the last year and a half. And look, I've been so impressed. His first couple of weekends in this Supra, and he looks right at home, fighting against drivers with real pedigrees. I mean, Kiko Porto, USF 2000 champion. Chris Walsh, SRO Touring Car champion with some GT4 experience. Clemens is a guy who's got a lot of racing under his belt in recent years in single make competition, and he's right there with them. So big congratulations to Ian Porter.
How much fuel do you think is in the fuel cell of the number 30? Another, I don't know, 5 liters? I'm pretty sure there's plenty in it right now, because that issue that they had this morning was not going to repeat itself. But this young man, Valentino Catalano, does indeed repeat with the victory, and this has got to feel good after the heartbreak this morning.
No question. This is vindication of the speed that they've had throughout the weekend, and you know, great way to put the frustration of how race 1 ended behind them. It's almost better that they got to race again today, don't you think? You don't have to dwell on that overnight, and you can just get right back to business. And look, they were absolutely, as it seemed, the class of the field this weekend. Gebhardt Interlogistics Motorsports, relatively new to racing stateside, but they are a force with this Duquesne DO8.
Well, and it takes a team, and it takes that relationship with the driver. The driver has to believe in the team and vice versa. And I guarantee you, after the problems that they had this morning, Valentino Catalano was obviously upset. But when he stepped foot in that car this afternoon and rolled off the grid, he believed that he had a car underneath him and a team behind him that could get him to victory lane. You have to think that way. And I said this earlier, for that young man, 19 years old, he is mature well beyond his years.
And we saw that with the way he managed traffic, I think. He was aggressive when he needed to be, but never dropped a wheel, never made contact. Just a really, really quality drive.
Look at Ian Porter climbing out. He was like feigning exhaustion and kind of hugging his car. You know, I mean, but yeah, heady drives. Jake Walker climbs out. He'll celebrate another win. And Ian Porter has done battle in Call of Duty. We talked about being a 3-time world champion, and today he did it on the racetrack, and he'll celebrate his first win. Look at Valentino. Well, that's actually his teammate. That's
Oscar.
That's Tunho. Yeah. Getting his helmet off.
This is a big moment for the team, though, after what happened in race 1, to put that behind them and come out, utterly dominate this race. Just fantastic.
Good stuff. Unofficial results. You got a clear tech, but let's take a look at how they finished on the racetrack. We talked about Catalano with a great victory, and Oscar Tunho, what a great debut in VP Racing SportsCar Challenge. The win for Jake Walker. There's stories all throughout the top 10, and then you go to the GSX category, and there's that word heartbreak again. When you go, where is Kiko Porto? Where is the guy who led most of the race? Well, he's not even on the second page of results.
Yeah, you hate to see that for him. He's been so good this year, had been perfect on the year coming in, 3 straight wins to start the season, and was just minutes away from getting a 4th when something seemed to go awry in that race car. There he is, all the way back in 22nd position overall. Not at all representative of the kind of speed he had.
Not at all, but that's why we race. We talked about it this morning. You take the victories as they come. You go, you work hard, you race all the way to the checkered flag. That's exactly what all of these drivers did. They'll do it again the next time the VP Racing SportsCar Challenge heads out on track, and that will be from the Mid-Ohio SportsCar Course, June 6th through 8th, that weekend at Mid-Ohio. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We had great racing here. We expect to see it all year long. Plenty of the season left. For Ryan Marine, I'm Brian Till. We'll see you next time from the Mid-Ohio SportsCar Course.